Arjun, whatever pleasures are born of contacts with objects are only sources of sorrow. They have a beginning and an end, O son of Kunti. No wise man delights in them. So in this verse, Shri Krishna describes the third quality needed to become Samadarshi. We're talking about Samadarshi, which means having an equal eye, seeing everything with an equal eye, and these qualities were mentioned in the previous verses. The third one is Kama Dito Shadadarsanam, which is in this verse, Kama Darshanam, meaning seeing the fault in running after material objects. Shri Krishna refers to pleasures born of contact with the senses. What happens is that because of attachment, a person runs after such material objects more and more. In this verse, Shri Krishna wants to give us a message of Kama Dito Darshanam, meaning a person runs after these material objects because of his desires. These come from contact with the objects of senses. Srimad Adi Shankaracharya has written a very nice verse, and we see the same verse, albeit in a slightly different wording, in the Garud Purana. It's Kuranga Matranga Patanga Brugam Meena Hata Panchari Pancha Eka Pramadi Sattanase Yasye Veta Pancha Vidiva Pancha. It says, like a deer that gets pulled by sweet music, like an elephant gets pulled by a she-elephant, like a moth gets pulled by the color of a flame, like a honeybee gets pulled by the fragrance of a lotus, and like a fish that nibbles at the bait and gets caught. It's verse 22. So this shows how a person that runs after the objects of senses reaches their end. An example has been given for the objects of each of the senses here. You may like to read it in the Srimad Bhagavad. Avadhuta gave these 5 animals a place amongst his 24 teachers, because they taught him how to keep control of the senses. First, the ears. In order to catch deers, a hunter makes sweet music using instruments. Hearing the music, the deer becomes attracted and pulled towards it. Another 15 or 20 hunters are waiting, having created a big net. They trap the deer in the net and kill it. Because the deer does not have control over its hearing senses, it gets caught and killed. It has so much attraction to music and seeks so much pleasure from that object of sense. Second, touch. In order to catch elephants, hunters make a model of a she-elephant and dig a pit underneath. They put leaves and grass on top of the pit so it looks like ground. An elephant comes from far away and sees the model she-elephant. It becomes attracted to her and runs towards the she-elephant. It cannot reach her in the end because it falls into the ditch first. The hunters do not give it anything to eat for 15 to 20 days. A living elephant is worth 100,000 rupees and a dead elephant is worth 25,000 rupees. It doesn't have control over his touch senses and therefore gets attracted and pulled. That is why the elephant meets his death. Third, sight. A moth sees the color of a flame and likes the color so much it goes towards the flame. Gets caught in the flame and dies. This is the attraction of sight. Urdu poets write a lot of poems. They say, Shama ko dekhkar unki parwana unki kurbani deta hai, meaning, on seeing a flame, a moth sacrifices himself. Sanskrit poets say that this is not sacrifice but stupidity. So many moths have died by going into the flame over all these years, and yet they still do not realize that they're going to die by going into the flame. I'm not making fun of the poem. What I'm saying is that the flame is a form of the Supreme Soul, and they say the flame is a form of the Supreme Soul, and a moth is a form of the individual soul. When the individual soul sees the beauty of the Supreme Soul, then goes inside and becomes one with it. But people only use this regarding the beauty of one's skin. One who runs after this type of beauty and this form gets finished. Fourth, smell. A honeybee gets attracted to the smell of a lotus and goes outside the lotus in the evening to suck its juice. When the sun rises, the lotus closes and the honeybee gets trapped inside the lotus. A honeybee is able to eat walls made out of clay, made by people, and yet cannot come out of a closed lotus. If it wants, it can, but it doesn't. Why? Because it likes the smell inside so much that it sits inside thinking, Rate gamashati bhavishanti suprabhatam bhavashya dehanti hasya pankajasvi idyan vichayanti koshagate videfe ahantanali lingaja uchahara. It is night now, and night will go, morning will come, and the sun will rise. The flowers in the garden nearby will bloom, and when my flower blooms, then I'll go. The bee thinks this, but then a herd of elephants come and stamp on the flower and the bee is killed. It thinks it's so simple, but life is not that simple. A herd of elephants come out of the water in the morning and tear apart the flowers. At that time, when the foot of the elephant steps on the flowers, the bee becomes finished. The bee is an example of every individual. You, me, and we are all closed in this lotus that's the material world, and we like the smell a lot. Saints, great personalities, wise people, knowledgeable people keep telling us to come out because we have the power to do so. They tell us to come out of the lotus. We tell them to wait for 5 years, 10 years, or 15 years. We cannot come out, and we do not know when death in the form of an elephant will come. Ahanta nalidim gaja uchara hara. It becomes finished. The bee has a big attachment to the sense object of smell. Then we have touch, the fish. The fish does a round to go and eat somewhere near the water surface and gets stuck. The fisherman puts a flower on top of a hook, so it acts like a bait. The fish sees the flower, comes to eat it, and gets stuck in the hook. Whenever someone becomes greedy for happiness, they just run after it and get stuck in the hook just like the fish. The pleasures of senses are like this. The fish has no control over the sense object of tasting. Sansparshahaja bogaha. The scriptures say that if these animals do not have control over one of the senses get finished, then what about human beings? Because they have no control over all 5 senses. Words, touches, forms, tastes and smell. A human being runs after all 5 of these. What will happen to him? A person that runs after this gets finished. Many great souls in many religious scriptures have criticized the ardent desires of human beings in running after material objects. They have disgraced it. They have tried to warn people against it. There's a very beautiful verse in the Vishnu Purana saying that the more a human being runs after bodily pleasures and sensual pleasures, then each of these pleasures become like nails which bang onto his conscience. This is because sorrows come from imagining about pleasures. Sorrows cannot come from anywhere else. There's also another verse in the Vishnu Purana where it's written, Pranti granaha vruktashanan dukham eva sukhayate, meaning to the organs from which we get visual knowledge, eyes, sorrows appear like pleasures. People get all their knowledge from this vision, and hence their eye sees pleasures. In fact, there are sorrows there. Sorrows are material objects in which they see pleasures. That is why in the Bhagavad Gita, Maharishi Astavakra says, Muktim ichasi jetha vishayan vishvavatya, meaning, if one wishes to attain liberation as much as a baby child wishes to be around its father, one must leave material objects as if they are poison. Tata means father or an elderly person for whom we have very strong feelings. It's a feeling that a baby child wishes to get picked up by the father. There are 2 reasons for which what Maharishi Astavakra has said. Firstly, a person dies when he drinks poison, but material objects not only take one towards death when they're there, but they also make one worry about them when they're not there, and then they also take one towards their death. Poison only kills someone when he drinks it, but worrying about material objects kills someone by just making them worry about them. Secondly, poison just kills the physical body made out of the 5 elements, whereas material objects don't just kill the physical body, but also the good morals a person has accumulated since several births, because material objects lead to attachment in a person's mind, and from this, desires arise. These sorrows that arise from desires and the imprints that desires leave ruin many lives of this person. They become the reason for meaninglessness throughout the many lives of the person. That is why Muktim ichasi chetha vishan vishvavatya, meaning if one wishes to attain liberation as much as a baby child wishes to be around their father, they should leave material objects as if they're poison. The material objects have been criticized because they lead to sorrows. What are their sorrows? Because we always listen to what God is saying, but then we tell him that we find material objects very sweet. We get so much fun when the senses make contact with the objects, so how can one say that they're the source of sorrows? How are they the source of sorrows? We tell God that we cannot see the sorrows. What are these sorrows? The scriptures say that 3 sorrows arise from running after material objects. The first is sorrows arising from the consequences. We have to think about this. I'll say in short, but think about it when you sit in silence at home. Sorrows arising from consequences are that when one is enjoying material objects after making contact with the sense objects through the senses, then pleasures come from the material objects, but in that time, from that time, strength, beauty, wealth, knowledge and morals are destroyed. Time, strength, beauty, wealth, knowledge and morals are destroyed. That is why the consequence of this is that sorrows arise. These are sorrows arising from the consequences. Time is destroyed, strength is destroyed, beauty is destroyed, wealth is destroyed, knowledge is destroyed, and morals are destroyed. I'll show you a simple experiment because I've seen this myself, and I'll ask you to see this for yourselves. You think that a certain film is running very nicely, and it's going to be a super hit, and everyone's saying that you have to go and see it. Go and stand outside the cinema showing this film when the show is about to start, let's say 6 o'clock. Look at the people inside, and you'll see a lot of happiness on their faces. They'd booked the tickets 5 days ago, know the owner of the cinema, and have collected the tickets. They go inside the cinema with so much excitement. Just look at the whole crowd. Then go back when the show finishes, let's say at 9 o'clock, and see the same people coming out. I guarantee you, you'll be lucky to find a single person who has a look of happiness on their faces. The rest of the people will just look tired and bored. If it was a boring film, then this would be justified, but it was a good film and a great film, yet people are coming out of the show but looking down and glum. Why are they like this? Because they have lost time, strength, beauty, wealth, knowledge and morals. That is why they have sorrows. If someone is so excited by even the thought of seeing the film, then you'll not get that much excitement by actually seeing the film. They should be like this, but it doesn't happen. The consequence of this is sorrows. This is the first type of sorrow from material objects. On Sunday, a program has been made to play bridge or to go for a picnic. The fun that goes into planning the picnic is not even replicated by half as much fun when people actually go for the picnic. And the fun in actually going for the picnic is not even replicated by even a quarter of the time that was much in going home after the picnic. Shouldn't there be fun during all of these events? The people are tired and bored. The sorrows that arise as a consequence are the first type of sorrows that arise from material objects. Even then, people don't learn and improve. After 2 or 4 months, they start planning another picnic even though they came back tired and bored the last time they went on a picnic. The first type of sorrow is that which arises as a consequence from contact with the material objects. The second type of sorrow is that they burn you inside. This is because when you're enjoying material objects, then the pleasure you get is not 100% pleasure. There is a sorrow hidden in that pleasure. The sorrow burns because of fear that that pleasure may go away. If a person has £1 million, then should he not be happy? It does not happen because he has £1 million and yet he has this fear of all of it going away. A person worries that the fame he has gained may go away. Another person worries that the beauty she got may go away. This is a sorrow of burning inside because of fear that the pleasure may go away. There are 3 types of this burning inside. The first is a thought that the pleasure may go away. The second is that the person is envious of someone who has a larger quantity of such pleasures than him. This gives him sorrow. If someone has a car and sees someone else has 2 cars, another person 3 cars, and yet another person has the latest cars, on seeing these people, the person loses the pleasure he had from just having 1 car. This is a burning sorrow because of envy. The third burning inside is that the sorrow as a result of the pleasure make him feel incomplete. The pleasure feels incomplete to him. It always seems too little to him. Pleasures that arise from contact with the senses, with the objects, always seem too little. This is a sorrow that arises from the incompleteness of material objects, and this burns a person inside. The third type of sorrow in running after material objects is that of sanskar. Sanskar normally means morals, and therefore we may find this statement strange, but sanskar has a different meaning here. The enjoyment that one gets from material pleasures leaves an imprint in one's mind, which is called sanskar. This causes problems when we're not enjoying that material pleasure, or when the enjoyment out of the material pleasure goes away. Hand out verse 22. For example, if one gets happiness from his wife, and then his wife went away, then he'll keep remembering how much happiness his wife gave him. This means went away, and this person keeps remembering it. This sorrow is that of sanskar, mental imprints. The means from which he got his pleasure is not going to be there forever, because this is something that can be destroyed. It is temporary. It is going to be destroyed, and when it is destroyed, then one remembers the times when it gave him happiness. When something is not with someone, then it does not give him as much pleasure as the sorrow that it gives him when he's not with that person, because now he keeps remembering it. When it was there, then didn't give him that much sorrow. The pleasure was there, but it wasn't of that much importance to him because he took it for granted. But after it went away, his sorrow increased. This is the sorrow of mental imprints. Whenever there are pleasures arising from the contact with the senses, with objects, then there will also be pains. These are the three sorrows of consequences, which are the consequences of running after material objects, the burning inside, and the mental imprints. Shri Krishna says in this verse 22 that pleasures arising from contact with material objects are only sources of sorrow. If the senses had not made contact with objects, then these sorrows would not have come. There would be no sorrows of consequences, burning, nor imprints. Until then, the only sorrow you would have is one of not having the object, but when they come, you have three types of sorrows. Then which state is better, the having or not having? When one does not have the object, then he only has one sorrow, the sorrow of not having the object. But after having the object, he gets three types of sorrows. Shri Krishna then says in this verse that the pleasures arising from contact with material objects have a beginning and they have an end. They have an arrival date and they have a departure date. The beginning is certain and the end is certain. That is why Shri Krishna says that in this verse that no wise man delights in these pleasures. I repeat again that Shri Krishna uses the word delights, hence wise people use material objects but do not delight in them. They do not become dependent on them. They are not an only source of pleasure for them, because the supreme peace that wise people have leads to happiness that is undying. Shri Krishna said in the last verse that this happiness is undying because a person has attained Brahmistiti, or oneness with Brahman. The happiness and bliss one gets from Brahmistiti only comes from Brahman. This bliss from Brahman is undying, whereas material pleasures have a beginning and an end. They'll expire and they'll get destroyed. That's why no wise person delights in these pleasures. Let's go on to the next verse.